Oh, let's go. Check, 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 check. Check, check, check. Yeah, can you hear me? All right, let's go. What's up, y'all? Here we go. Okay, let's go. What's up? Hope everything's all right. Hope the level's all right because everything reset. So here we go. So tonight we're covering F. Paul Wilson's The Keep, and this is the novel that the 1983 movie The Keep by Michael Mann. This is what it's based on. So this is a deep cut, y'all. This is a Michael Mann deep cut. Of course, we've covered Michael Mann before. We did Heat 2, which is we did the novel right up there, Heat 2. And that's pretty prescient because thank you so much, Ryan. Appreciate it. I mean, Matt, appreciate it. Shouts out to everybody out there. We got Technor Graphics, we got Mixkey, we got Block Party, we got everybody out there. So yeah, we took a little breather there, but we're back. And this one, I always say this one's going to be different, but this one is truly going to be different because my thoughts about this novel are kind of I don't know, they're pretty complex in the sense that um it well, you can see why Michael Mann took the novel and then sort of completely changed some of the key elements. And the film is interesting because the studio cut the film way down. Like he wanted to have like a 3.5 hour cut of the movie in 1983. And it's not his first film, it's his second film, I think. His first was Thief, and Thief is, regarded as, a great film because it's so true to life in the sense that it depicts, like, the Highline robbery and the early elements that we see later in Heat, and other Mann films with, James Caan. Remember James Caan? "Ah!" James Caan can't turn his neck. In all of his movies, he can't turn his neck. There's a great thing about James Caan actually in the book American Desperado, which is right up here by Roberts and Wright, and that's pretty good because there's a part where the guy talks about how this guy was like the major let's say associate of Pablo, and he was living in Miami. He was responsible for a lot of the traffic that was coming in, and he like all these celebs would want to come hang out with him. And one night, OJ, the juice is loose. OJ and James Caan, who were apparently like good friends, came and hung out with him. And James Caan was kind of a trip, but he said also kind of annoying. And this guy was like a mafiosi turned intelligence turned trafficker, let's say. And we might actually dive into that later a little bit, something related to that, because I'm thinking about maybe analyzing a different film, completely different from this movie or this book later on in the stream. So we'll see how it goes. And I'll mention that later. But so the book is The Keep by F. Paul Wilson. The book was published in 1981. And this is truly I mean, it's supposed to be a horror novel, but it's interesting because it's got all these different elements in it. It's got Nazis, it's got Archons, it's got Talismans, it's got sort of a Gnostic quest slash Arthurian through line in it. It's got a love story. It's set in Romania. It's got vampires, and it's interesting because when you're reading it, you automatically think because it's in Romania that it may have like vampires. It's a horror novel. And then you go along in the novel and you're like, "No, it's not about that at all." And then you realize, yes, it is about that. And then at the end of the book, you're like, "No, it's not about that." So it's weird how the book okay, so I'll just say this. The book is I don't often do this, but like the book is too long. And I don't mean in the sense that like it, takes a long time to read it. That's sort of neither here nor there. It's just it's too long, and it's like we could have taken one or two of the storylines in the book and edited out the rest, and it would have been the same story. So it's kind of like trying to be a saga, but it's not really that. And I'm not like reviewing the book. I'm just saying that in terms of, an analysis of like the core elements in it, There's a lot that's extraneous. So, here's what it's about. It says a novel of the adversary cycle. What I don't know anything about that. I don't know, F. Paul Wilson's other books. I decided to get the book a while ago because I liked what the film is about. I like the film, Michael Mann's film. And it's kind of a cult classic. It's certainly not well known. It's actually hard to find. And there are elements in it like first of all, it's Michael Mann, and I love his films. Second of all, it's got a great cast. It's got Scott Glenn is amazing. Scott Glenn is like 90 years old now, and that's strange because he doesn't seem that old. And he was in the military in real life. I think he was a Marine. He played Colby in Apocalypse Now. Remember that Colby? Colby, is that you? He has no lines. He's just standing there like with the scalps on his shotgun in Kurtz's compound. So he's in Apocalypse Now. He's in Buffalo Soldier. Buffalo Soldier is a great film that probably I don't know if any of y'all have seen it. It came out in 2000. I think it came out like at the same time as the Big Nine event. So it was like pushed out of theaters because of its content because it's about a an army guy in like 19 I guess it's 1989 in West Germany played by Joaquin Phoenix who's awesome in it. It's my favorite role of his and it's got Ed Harris who plays kind of a bumbling head of this military base. Scott Glenn plays the villain. And anyway, um, Joaquin Phoenix is like running the black market operation at the military base. And it's really cool because it's got this cool soundtrack and it gives you like a really good insight into the sort of underworld at the military base because he's trading what's he trading? First of all, he's requisitioning like bleach and all types of material from the army, and then he's just selling it to the town or whatever. Then he meets this guy, and this guy's like a Turkish, opium warlord or something in Germany. So he makes this deal with him, and he gets this raw opium, and he cooks it. He's basically a cook, and he has to do all this like sort of undercover at the military base but it gets infiltrated by Scott Glenn, who's like this hard ass, like Green Beret. Anyway, that's a great film. So that's Scott Glenn. He's in a bunch of great movies, and it's interesting because in the book, the character Glaken, who's like one of the main characters in this, is actually called Glenn for most of the book. So it's sort of meta. I wonder if when they were casting, they were like, "Well, he's called Glenn, and we've got Scott Glenn. He's like, he fits the role because he's got these eyes." So they just hired him. But anyway, so that's what I'm talking about. Like the characters change names, and that fits the content in terms of what I'm going to get into about who the characters are. But it also becomes kind of tedious. Like we have a Wehrmacht character, then we've got an SS Sturmbannführer played by who is it? Gabriel Byrne, who's good. He's great for the role. Jurgen Prochnow from Das Boot. How do you say his last name? He is the good soldier. Ian McKellen, which is really weird because this is 1983, and when you're watching the movie, especially now, you're like, why is Ian McKellen playing this guy Cusa or Cusa? So Ian McKellen plays this guy who is a Jewish historian, but he's Romanian by birth, and the guys at the keep, which is where the like I guess garrison is, they have to go search him out because he's the expert in like old languages and the history of the area. And so he's like trying to it's much more complex in the book. Like he's trying to navigate his way through not being sent to the camps while also staying alive enough to like solve this sort of riddle at the keep. And then the two main characters are, of course, Molasar, who is he's this guy right here. That's Molasar with these glowing red hell eyes, these light beams coming out of his eyes. And then, of course, we get the his opposite, the good guy, who is Let me find it. Who is Scott Glenn, and he plays Lakin. And so the book is weird because once you figure out who the characters are, and that really doesn't take long. It sort of tries to upend things and like tell you that the characters are different. It also goes in a few different religious directions, but then kind of for no reason it goes in an opposite direction. So that all sort of makes sense in the general form of the narrative, but it's kind of tedious. Okay, so anyway, let me tell you what the book is about. So in the early 1940s, there's this town in Romania. It's in the Transylvanian Alps, and it's in the Carpathian Mountains. And they don't really make that clear though. They just say it's in Romania. And so the Wehrmacht arrives, just the German army. They arrive because they are setting the stage for Operation Barbarossa, which is going to be the later invasion of Russia, of course. And this is kind of a staging area for the Ploesti oil fields in Romania. So we'll get more into that later, but they have to this place is, like, so remote, it's like the villagers are like, "Who are these people?" Right? So the Wehrmacht arrives, and they don't really mess with the village. They sort of see this castle keep, these giant walls, and there's, like, a moat, and they stop, and they sort of the main dude, like, walks over the bridge and goes into the keep. And so what we see is interesting because as soon as he walks inside, you notice that, and he makes a point of explaining this, that um, the castle walls, the castle keep is sort of like built in the opposite way. So the like megalithic stones, it's made of these huge stones, and the stones are on the inside wall of the keep instead of on the outside. So you would expect the castle to be built so that the thick walls, the stone is on the outside to keep out the invasion. But instead, it's on the inside. And then the first thing that the soldiers notice is that there are these like kind of glowing, shiny crosses set all through like the walls of the castle. And they're all like at the same height, they're all equidistant. And they're also kind of strange because they're crosses, but, like, they're not exactly crosses, like, something is a little off. They look like, towel crosses, right? Where the top of the cross is sort of it's not high enough. So the crossbar is, like, set too high. So you're like, "What is this?" And when you're reading it, you know that this is gonna be some sort of, like, sigil or it's gonna be something slightly different. But they're set sort of equidistant throughout the walls. And so the soldiers go in, and one of them, they're sort of setting up their base, and immediately one of them, like, he takes out his bayonet, and he starts, like, trying to, like, get the cross out of the wall. And the main dude, Jurgen, first he meets with the Orthodox priest who's there, and he kind of takes him into the castle, and then he meets, like, the castle guardian, the keeper, and he's this old dude who I guess is blind. He's sort of a I don't know. He's a blind seer. He's got this staff and he's walking along. He's in traditional garb. And Jurgen's like, "Who are you?" And the guy's like, "I'm the keeper. I'm the caretaker." And he's like, "Well, how long have you been the caretaker?" And he's like, "I've always been the caretaker. My dad was the caretaker. My granddad, his dad before him, and so forth, like to the beginning of time, right? And then his sons will be the caretakers." So they see one of the soldiers, like, trying to get the cross out of the wall, and they run up to him, and he's like the guy's like, "Never touch the crosses, like, never touch them." And, you can tell that Jurgen is kinda thinking like, "Okay, this is" they don't want us touching their stuff. Um, but they ask the soldier, and he's like, "Well, the rumor is that these are, like, that they're silver, and that the castle is built that way because here's the conspiracy, right? Because it's sitting on top of a hoard of Vatican gold. So they think, okay, I'll take this. This will be a spoil of war or whatever. And then they think they can maybe move some of the stones and they can get to the gold. Well, the caretaker is like they're not silver. They're made of like nickel and, whatever. They just look shiny, but they're not silver. And then so Jurgen, he's the good guy because he's like, if you touch these again, don't mess with these people and you're on guard duty for a week. Well, that night when they're on guard duty, of course, the guy like runs back to the cross and he tells one of his buddies, he's like, that's gold, there's gold, and they take the cross off the wall. And then the stone like slightly moves. And then the guys like, they see that like the stone has come out and it's like, it's, I don't know, 10 feet thick, right? And they don't know how it's come out of the wall, but there's like a small like passageway where the guy wants to get up and climb in. So he says, like tie my feet with a belt and I'm going to go in, I'm going to have a look. So he goes in and as soon as he does that, the movie visualizes it pretty well because you see that when he pushes the stone in, there it's just this yawning gulf of like blackness. It's an abyss. So the castle is built on some sort of abyss. And in the movie, it's kind of crazy because we see this light like way up, and then there's like a photon ball, which is going to be Molisar, and he like sort of flies in between these Yakin and Boaz like space columns, and then he goes up to the thing, and then next thing we hear this whooshing sound, and the guy's screaming, and the other, his buddy like pulls him in, and he's got half a body. It's just his bottom half, and the top of his body has been like ripped off. Well, it's different in the book because um, the characters like have their throats ripped out, and it's like really vicious. And so then they're all on guard. And then Jurgen's on guard that night, and another guard dies. And what he was told also by the guy was that there's nothing like, don't mess with the castle. It's not, nobody has died inside because nobody sleeps inside the castle. And he says, well, what are they all afraid of? Ghosts? And he's like, dreams. So we're like, okay, this is a, psychological horror. What's the deal? But we realize that the castle is, it's not haunted. It's like some sort of nexus point, right? So there's some kind of thing under the castle and it affects everyone's dreams. And he does a good job of that in the book, sort of playing into that because, another thing is that we notice in the book, and this ties up at the end, is that Jurgen, when he pulls up, he notices that the one thing that the castle doesn't have is birds. There are no birds, there are no pigeons, and this is interesting because he is from Prussia. He's a Prussian soldier. So that's obviously foreshadowing the fact that when the SS comes in, he's not going to be friendly with them because they're Bavarian and he's a Prussian. He's like from the old class of, German soldiers. So he's going to look down on them. Well, anyway, he's used to the German castles. And, the one thing he always notices is that castle walls and battlements always have birds and pigeons hanging out on them. And there's just nothing. It's just still air and nothingness. So he's like, okay, that's strange. So anyway, soldiers start dying overnight. And it's weird because where they die, there's no entrance or exit. There's no, he can't find any like secret passages because the stones are so big. And so then what happens is there's sort of relief, not really relief, but the SS comes in and this is bad news. Okay. So not only is it the SS, but it is a squad of Einsatzgruppen, the Einsatzkommando. And of course, anybody here, I'm sure you guys know this, especially the dudes in the audience or anybody in the history. The Einsatzgruppen are the death squads. And this SD, death squad comes in. They're in their, they're black and everything. And there's something clever with this. The way the book is structured is clever in this sense because what we have here is we can tell, and this isn't spoken, it's just shown. So this is a good example of some of the art, the crafting of the novel that he does here. And I give him credit for this. That you kind of forget that the when the SS comes in, they sort of function as neo knights, right? Because that's how they saw themselves. They're sort of the Black Knights, and a kind of neo medieval order of Teutonic Knights. And I mean, this is like self-professed. This is in their symbolism. Think of Himmler and later Michael Aquino at Wavelsburg Castle, right, doing the weird rituals and all that. But anyway, they show up and they immediately take a group of the locals and they do away with them. And Jurgen is not happy about this. He does not like this, and that's because we learn that Jurgen is he and Gabriel Byrne. I forget, what's his name, Hamfer or something. I'm just going to call him Gabriel Byrne. They are both, formerly World War I soldiers, but we learned that Jurgen, of course, is from the Prussian officer class, and he is the only dude that did not run away or die in, a couple of the battles in World War I. And in fact, the SS guy was also there, and he was younger, and he sort of ran away, um, with cowardice. And so, of course, he now outranks Jurgen because he's this SS guy and he's now in charge of the garrison and all this. But they know that about each other, right? So it's this. We have this human mirror. Human meaning like these guys are real life people. We have this human um, mirror of what's going to happen later in the story, and is like on a deeper level, and it's literally deeper because it's subterranean in the location in the text, but it's also in the subtext, and it's like the deeper meaning of war in general, right? So we have these two characters who are at odds with each other, and one is good. We're supposed to see one as purely good, and one is sort of purely bad, and they do a pretty good job of that in terms of their actions, in the war. And so what we're supposed to get from this is that World War II is just another iteration of, the never-ending war that has plagued humanity. And that gets kind of hokey in the book, but we're going to see where he goes with that. So what happens is, then we see that there is this character, there's this being that is inside the castle, and that is this guy named Molasar, and we're gonna meet him. Like, there's a lot more about him in the book, and that's totally left out of the film, and it gives good context for why the film is kind of weird. So this dude is this huge being with like sort of his insides on his outsides. And clearly Stranger Things season 4 took what's his name? Vecna from, obviously he's like sort of Hellraiser and a bunch of other characters. But obviously they took inspiration from this guy because he looks exactly the same, but he's red. And this guy just has red eyes. He's got these red glowing hell eyes. And so we learn in the book that so he like graffitis the wall, and nobody can figure out what the message says, because it's not in German, it's not in Romanian, and the SS guy says, "Whoever wrote this is a partisan, and we're going to start killing the villagers until this stops." Right. So, um, of course he's gonna think that. He's gonna think that, like, they get there and there's this secret partisan group and they're gonna start killing. So he tells them basically, like, "We're gonna kill 10 people for every 1 German that you kill." Now, Jurgen does not want this because Jurgen, first of all, doesn't believe in, like, warring on the citizens. He thinks of himself as, like, a classical soldier, and he is not a fan of, Hitler. And 2, because he knows that, like, no human did this, because in the middle of the night, 2 of the dead German soldiers came into his room and terrorized him, and then he saw Molasar appear, like, in a shadow. So, he knows it's, like, not a ghost, and it's not a human thing, and all of the Germans that are there are, like, totally mesmerized, with this nightmare, and they wanna leave, right? Um, but of course, the Einsatz guys, they just wanna kill everybody. So, anyway, in the book, what happens is, um, they gotta figure out what this thing says on the wall, and so they contact one of the Romanians there, says, "Oh, well, I know a guy, he's, like, the expert on ancient languages, and he's a historian, but there's a problem, obviously, you're not gonna like it, um, but we should go get him." So they go get him, and this is Ian McKellen. Now this is weird because when you're watching the movie, you're like, "This is 1981," and Ian McKellen looks like like sort of Gandalf without the big beard. Like he's super old. Why would they choose a guy who's obviously way younger to play this old guy? Because he's in a wheelchair. He's got a terminal disease. He's got all this stuff. And that is explained in the novel because they get the guy and they bring him and basically he comes to the village and he's like yeah, I can read this. It looks like old, Slavonic, but it's older than that. It's some sort of like dead medieval language. And you guys have a real problem on your hands because definitely none of the villagers wrote this. And they're like, "How do you know that?" And he's like, "Because the language has been dead for like 1,000 years, and literally nobody knows this." And he has to go into his like books or whatever and figure out what it says. And it says a different thing in the movie than it does in the book. So in the movie, it says like something like, "I want to be free," or something like that. But in the book, what does it say in the book? It says, let me find exactly what it says. And you sort of expect it to be written in runes, but it's not. It's just in this weird sort of graffiti language, and it looks like backwards, right? It's not Cyrillic. Um, oh God, I'm never gonna find it now. I marked the book, and then I can't find this one part. It says something like, I don't know, leave me alone or something like that. It's not really important. What is important is shouts out to Maddie out there, Digital Minefield, real cooter Brown. Thanks, homeboy. Thanks for that 9.99 super chat. Says nothing. Appreciate you. Um, Shouts out to everybody out there. Please smash the like, share the stream. Thank you for being here, guys. You can hit the super chat, the dono chat, any of the things in there to support me. All right, so anyway, he translates the message, right? And so there's this constant like back and forth because the SS guy keeps saying to him like, "Look, you got to figure this out. You got to stop these deaths that are occurring, and if you don't, I'm going to send you to wherever it is that he's going next because he's being sent to start up a new death camp. He's going to be the head of it, and he's also done his time at the notorious one, so that's not good." And so then what happens is the deaths do stop. And that is because uh Kuza, that's his name, is like sitting there reading his occult books, and he's reading like I forget what he's reading. He's reading, it's not like Hermes Trismegistus, it's like other classic, I don't know, occult books. There's one that's in Arabic. There's another one they're all super old. And all of a sudden, Molasar comes and sees him. This is at night. And the way he's described is pretty cool because he sort of appears out of nowhere in total darkness, and the way that they know that he's there is that like they get this. They're not only cold, but they get this like feeling of like absolute dread and like they've lost all hope, right? And it's like electric. And he appears, and he terrifies him, and he basically names himself. So he says, "Who are you?" And he names himself, and his name is Molasar. And we find out that this dude is you think like in the movie, he's clearly like some sort of archon, right? He like looks like, and he moves in like photon beam of light, weird, laser balls. And he's got these glowing eyes, and you think that he's sort of some sort of, fallen angel, Anunnaki, Aronofsky, Noah, Watcher guy or something, right? But in the book, what happens is he says it's weird because he appears in a completely different costume, and he's got like like he's wearing garb from the Middle Ages, and he's wearing this cape, and he's this great big guy, and Kuza is like, "Who are you?" And he says that he's a boyar from the Carpathian Mountains, and he's like, "What, like Vlad Tepes?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, I knew Vlad Tepes. He was a friend of mine, basically. I decided to ally with him because he says that his mission in life, the reason that he's doing what he's doing and is killing all the Germans and like ripping their throats out, is because his eternal mission or whatever is to uh, destroy the invaders on the Romanian, on the Wallachian land, and that Vlad is the main dude who did that, and that he was attracted to serving him because of when he was Vlad the Impaler when he was impaling all of the Turks. And so he, like, says that he's sworn this thing and that's why he's there. And that he tells Cusa basically that, the keep, is built to keep what does he say? He's like, "The keep is built to protect me, and the land and to keep everybody else out," right? Now, what we learned from the Romanians, the humans at the beginning of the film and in the book, is that they say the castle is built the opposite way, like inside out, because it's supposed to keep whatever's in there inside, right? So, in other words, it's a prison. So we've learned sort of two different things. It's a prison, and then Molasar says, "No, no, no, it's mine. It's to protect me, like for all ages until I'm released." Well, we obviously know that he's been released because they messed with the crosses, and um, so Cusa, who's Jewish, says that he's like, "Well, are you a vampire?" And the guy's like, "No, I'm not a vampire. There's no such thing as vampires per se. That's just over time. That's what people have like ascribed to Vlad. But he's something like a lot more than that." And he's like, "What?" So he's like, "Well, I have all of these. Like, I've got all this, swag here to test whether you're a vampire." And he's got garlic or whatever, and Molasar eats the garlic. He's like, "Nah, that's not a big deal." He's got a mirror, and, Molasar does not appear in the mirror, so he is, like, invisible in the mirror. And then I don't know, he's got some other stuff, and then he holds up a cross, and now he holds up the cross, and Molasar, like, freaks out, right? And he won't explain why, but he freaks out because of the cross. So, there's this interesting thing that happens where, Cusa, like, questions his own faith, and he's like, "Wait a minute, so if this guy is so afraid of the cross and, um, and that, like, there's a thing about how, Christ is Lord, and if he's afraid he doesn't want him to mention the name of Christ. He's like, maybe I'm all wrong in my religion and I should convert." But then he decides not to because I don't know why he decides not to. I guess because, um, his well, he gets into this thing about how his people are there, and because he knows the whole vampire thing, right? His people are there, and that like his study and his faith is what brought him there, and also he quotes it's the part where he quotes the Torah, and Molasar, like, doesn't even, like, know what that is. It has no effect on him, so he's like, "Oh, maybe that's not good." But, Molasar basically tells him that, "I'm not a bad guy. What I'm doing is getting rid of these guys," and Cusa's like, "Yeah, but I'm not," he says he's Jewish, and so he's not really one of them, and he's like, "Yeah, but where were you born?" He's like, "Well, I was born here." And he's like, "Well, then you're one of my people, and I'm not gonna stop until I get rid of these German invaders, and that's why I've been awoken." Well, we know that he hadn't been awakened because of that. We know he was awakened because they moved the cross. So, all right, so are you following me? Is this I'm just telling though what the whole book is about. But it's hard to get into the analysis of the book if I don't tell you, like, what happens in the narrative, and I'm assuming, I doubt, a lot of people have read this book. I'm sure some people will come and, they've seen the movie, but the movie takes a totally different route, and one of the ways they do that is we all of a sudden meet Scott Glenn, and Scott Glenn sort of, like, comes out of nowhere. Now, we see him, and he's like this, regular looking dude, in the movie at least, and he kind of travels. It's sort of a montage. It's cut out of the film mostly, and then he arrives at the village, and when he arrives, he's carrying this, like, case that looks like a pool cue, and, he meets, like, 2 of the Iron Guard, who are the Romanian, fascists under, who is it? Not is it Ceausescu? Who's the Romanian guy? Anyway, who's allied with, Hitler. Anyway, they have the outer perimeter, and they're like, "No, you can't come through here, dude. You're wearing a lumberjack shirt." And he's like, "I'm coming through." And so they're like, "Let's see what you have in the case here." 2 annoying guys. One's got a mustache. "Let's see what you have in this pool cue case." And he's like, "Don't touch that." And the guy tries to touch it. And in the film, Scott Glenn's eyes, like, glow blue. And they're like, like, looks into their soul, and they're terrified, and they sort of back off, and then he just goes. Well, the book is way better about this because, we get his whole story. So, for him, it starts off and he's, like, in some I think he's in Portugal. He's, like, in a Portuguese fishing village, minding his own business, working uh, a man's life, working on the boats or whatever. And all of a sudden he like has a dream and then he wakes up and he packs everything and then he splits, right? And that's because he's in this, weird archon telepathy with like whatever's going on in the keep. And we don't know why yet, but we're gonna get there. So he packs up everything he has and he splits and he's got this case with him. And it's cool because the details of this are cool because he wears this money belt, and in the money belt, he's got all this gold. He's got Krugerrands and he's got all the gold coins from the all of the, European nations. That will allow him to this guy's like the ultimate prepper. But, is he a secret agent? Is he an MK Delta? What is this guy? Well, he hitches a ride on this, small boat so he can, get through the Mediterranean. He's gotta get all the way to Romania. And this guy takes him, and then at the end, like, at the end of the journey where the guy's gonna drop him off, he pays the guy in gold, and he knows that the dude, like, somehow through his body language, that the dude is going to try to kill him and take the gold. And then, of course, he's lying down, and he senses, like, a knife over him, and he's like, "You don't have to do this." And the guy tries to, kill him or whatever, and, Glenn, Scott Glenn, disarms the guy and kills him. And he's like it says in the book, it's pretty cool because it's like he feels nothing about it. He has no emotion about it. He just realizes it happened and it was gonna happen, and he goes on. Then he gets on another boat. This time he's with, like, some old guy, and, he knows that guy's safe, and he thinks about asking the guy to take him further, um, and he's gonna pay him in with another gold piece. And then he's like, "You know what? I shouldn't do that because if I take this guy any further, we're gonna get caught by, a patrol boat and he's gonna get killed. I don't wanna do that." So he gets off the boat and then he flips the gold coin to him anyway, and that'll feed the guy's family for 100 years or whatever. Um, then he makes his way overland and finally he ends up in the Carpathian Mountains. Um, I have crossed oceans of time to find you. The Go back and watch my Dracula stream. We've done a lot of vampire stuff here. We did a whole vampire stream, remember, on, The Hunger. We talked about what did we talk about? The Hunger. Did we talk about Byzantium, that film I don't think we did Byzantium, but we need to do that. We did Morbius. We did, of course, Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I think is an excellent movie. Uh, anyway, so he makes his way to the Carpathian Mountains. He gets up there and he takes a room at the only inn in town, right? And they're like, "Wow, somebody took a room. Why? When we've got like an SS death squad and the war's going on and nobody ever comes here." Plus, this guy's like, super Chad. Like everybody notices that right away. But he tries to keep a low profile. And then eventually he meets this girl, Magda. Now, Magda is the daughter and the sort of caretaker of Cusa, and remember, Kuza is, Ian McKellen. "I love what you've done with your hair, huh?" It's the best line in what is that? X-Men, whatever the X-Men is from, like, 2002. There's a scene where Ian McKellen is, like, on a bus with, what's her face? The shapeshift I don't know X-Men, the shape-shifting girl who's hot in real life, who's married to that guy from God, I'm not really doing a good job of this. Jeremy what's the guy's name she's married to? Jeremy, he's in that show where they, like, jump through time. He's a real, dork. What's that girl's name? Anyway, she's the shape-shifting girl, and they're sitting there in the bus, and, they look at, the girl, and and they're laughing, and they show Ian McKellen, and he goes, "Hmm, we love what you've done with your hair." It's like sitting there gossiping with this woman about the girl's hair. Anyway, it's a good line. Um Oh, weirdly enough, in that one, remember, Magneto's origin story is explained, and he also is a product of escaping the, certain camps. Remember that? Um, anyway, somebody in chat, please tell me the girl's name who turns blue, the shape-shifting girl. She was super hot, and she's married to that dork. What is her name? Jeth will know. If Jeth was here, he would know. Anyway, so, not J-Law, not J-Law. That's the new X-Men. That's like Neo, millennial Zoomer X-Men. I'm talking about the 2000s, um, X-Men. Anyway, remember the one with Kelsey Grammer? Kelsey Grammer plays Beast. That's weird. The ones that were directed by that, the creeper guy. Anyway, I digress. So what happens is, he meets Magda, and, Magda is the daughter of Cusa. Rebecca Romaine, thank you. Awesome. Points to, TJO. Rebecca Romaine, Mystique, thank you. Yes, Rebecca Romaine. Super hottie in the 2000s. What happened to her? Rebecca Romaine Stamos. Remember when John Stamos was in the Beach Boys Bermuda Bahama video? I remember that video, that music video premiered like on TGIF or something in the late 80s or early 90s. And John Stamos is in it, like playing bongos. Whatever. Anyway, so Chad Chattinson meets Magda, and Magda is the daughter of Kusa, who is Ian McKellen. And they like have a thing, and she kind of relays what Molasar has been saying to Ian McKellen. So he meets with Molasar every night, and eventually they develop this thing, and the Nazis let him keep meeting him because every night that he meets with him, nobody dies. So they want that. However, we later figure out that this is like a plan, and it's crazy because yes, yes, Krista. It's crazy because Molasar like also is playing this weird double game because he doesn't want Ian McKellen to be talking to the Nazis that he's working for, because if he does, then he's on their side, and Molasar wants to get rid of them. Now, of course, Cusa doesn't want to do that either because he also wants to get rid of them, but he can't get rid of them because if he does, then they'll leave and he'll be sent to the death camp. Right. So they're at sort of an impasse. Just like where the keep is situated, which is in a mountain pass. So, so, um, so then what happens is, I'm gonna kind of fast forward here. So Glenn reveals that we've known him as Glenn in the whole book, and it's Scott Glenn in the movie, which is again meta. But he reveals that his real name is Glaken. And later, when Ian McKellen mentions this to Molasar like freaks out and he's like, "What did this dude look like?" Well, he says he has red hair. He's got like shocking red hair, and he's got these bright blue eyes, and he's this Chad guy. And he's like, "Oh no, please don't tell me you brought the alpha Chad here all the way from Portugal." This guy doesn't have a country. He doesn't have a home. He's a man without country, and he won't say how old he is. But we can obviously figure out that he is like some sort of eternal being, right? And that he is the opposite of Molasar. Because in the movie he shows up and he's going to fight him with like a sort of a super long lightsaber. Well, so we figure out basically that Molasar wants Ian McKellen to be his human, like his Renfield, basically, and that he is a sort of a vampire, but everybody's got the vampire story all wrong because, as he explains in the book, vampires aren't feeding on blood, they're feeding on, the energy of human life, trying to destroy God's creation, through their life force, which is not something that people didn't figure out. That's, like, the whole symbolism, but I guess he's trying to say that, like, on the surface, most people just think that. Well, he's like, "I want you to be my guy, and your job is to go into the bowels of the castle keep, into the abyss, and you're gonna get this talisman, and you're gonna take the talisman out of the castle, and you're gonna bury it somewhere secret, and if you do that, then I will go and I will destroy this guy, Lord Hotler, and all of his armies that are invading Romania, and then everything will be safe, right? So he claims he's going to go and he's going to defeat evil. So this is crazy because this is a long section of the book, and we think, okay, so wait, so the bad guy is not the bad guy; he's actually a good guy because he's killing the bad guys. And I mean, Vlad Tepes is the defending Christianity in the Carpathian Mountains by, destroying the invaders, right? Well, it doesn't end up like that. So he explains that the crosses are actually not crosses because there's something that he says precedes all of human knowledge, and that he's from the first age. And this is like real Gnostic Archon stuff. That he is a being who's been there a long time, and then we learn from Glaken that he's not just as old as that. Like this guy's been around since the beginning of time, and that he's actually just pure chaos, and he takes on a form through the ages. He takes on some sort of form which is appropriate for the time, and that he's killing the bad guys so he can like restore his life force because he's going to feed on them. But actually, he says everything Molasar told your dad is a lie because this guy's he's pure evil. And so Magda's like, "What do you mean pure evil? Like he's Satan?" And he's like, "This is weird in the book because he's like, no, 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 that's just a thing. It's way older than that." And you're like, "Okay, all right. Well, the way you just described him was like, Lucifer. So whatever." It's weird because in the book you're like, is the author trying to like he's trying to get us to relate to how we look at the worldview in the book is Christian, but then like say there's something way older and that these guys are like some sort of unknowable Anunnaki, and that the world, the way he brings it out is basically like the world is just equal forces of good and bad, and they're always fighting each other. And when you're reading it, you're like, okay, hot take, like every book does that. That's like the thing in every work of literature and every movie, right? Um, the Jedi and the freaking Empire or whatever. It's the same thing over and over. So that part's kind of lame, but how he does it is kind of interesting because the form and the content work together in this kind of well. Because what he's doing here is he's showing you that he's getting the reader to question their, I guess, presuppositions and their beliefs about looking into the world of the novel, right? Not about their own beliefs, but about like the worldview in the novel, right? So he's trying to get you to doubt your own beliefs or your own faith in terms of the understanding the worldview in the novel. And like that doesn't work. I mean, I don't know. I guess it works like if it's 1981 and you're reading the novel and like you just read science fiction or you're like some sort of normie. I don't know who does that, but um obviously Michael Mann read it and was like, yeah, there's some good stuff in this, but a lot of it's lame and we're gonna change it. Right. Um, but anyway, so we learned that the crosses are not crosses at all. In fact, they are the symbol of hilt of a sword. Okay. And that the sword is some sort of, prehistorical primordial lightsaber, and that it's like split in two parts. And that the reason that Molasar wants Glaken to move the sword or the talisman out of the castle is because he actually can't go near. It's his one weakness. He can't go near it. And Glaken like has to unite the hilt of the sword with the blade, and when he does that, then he can kill Molasar. But it's not like as simple as that because um he tells Molasar tells Ian McKellen Puza that they need to tell the SS guys they need to get rid of this guy. This guy's staying at the inn. They need to get rid of him. So they surround the inn and they like blast him, right? They blast him with their submachine guns. And, you think, oh, he's dead, but he's not really dead. And he falls into this ravine. So he falls into sort of a proto abyss that's later going to be the actual abyss underneath the castle. And Magda goes looking for him. They made love. They were sexing in the inn. And she's like, "Who's this Chad? Like he's from the beginning of time. He's not just he's the greatest ever or whatever." So it becomes a kind of a lame love story. And also like he's not human, so what is he doing? It's weird. I don't know. But anyway, so he tells her, "Go and get my pool cue case and bring me the blade or whatever." And she comes, she brings it to him. And when she does that, like his eyes glow blue and his whole body turns blue and he starts glowing, with this Gnostic light, and that heals him. That like all the bullets like start, all the shells start coming out of his body. Um, sort of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade style, right after he drinks the Holy Grail. And then he recovers, and then eventually he goes down into the keep and he confronts Molisar. In the meantime, by the way, the SS guy and the Prussian are like, they're at odds with each other. And Molisar makes it so that the like that the Prussian soldier like hangs himself. And that is going to show all of the soldiers like, oh, this guy ended up, defiling himself. Like this guy was nothing. And you're like, why is he doing that? Well, because Molisar feeds on any kind of like doubt or darkness or degradation. So the fact that the guy hangs himself shows you that like the things that people believe in this place are all sort of thrown. So basically, uh, what he's doing here in my sort of in my own edgy analysis is that he is doing exactly what the weird ex-hippie, creeper woman is doing in Prisoners. Remember we did our analysis of Prisoners with Jerry? Shouts out to Jerry out there. She is, uh Molisar is trying to make war on God by destroying people's anything good that they have, and that's why he killed the SS guys right away because they were already scarred, they had no feelings, and they had no goodness in them. So he couldn't like feed on them too long. Right. Um, but he knows that what's his name? Yeah, he's a meanie. He's a meanie man. He's mean, Mr. Man, which is what Ian McKellen probably said. Um, so in the meantime, by the way, one interesting thing is that the reason that they chose Ian McKellen for this, or a younger actor to play an older guy, is that one of Molisar's powers is that he starts to heal his body. So he rises from the wheelchair. So, the lame can walk, right? He's gonna die, and now he's given this life. So it's sort of a Dracula with Renfield thing, and it's an inversion of Christ, and Lazarus. And Glenn even says to him, like, "Okay, he healed you, but, like, at what cost, right? What's the price?" And he's like, "There's no price." And he's like, "Bro, everything has a price, man. You're some crippled ass dude sitting there and, reading these old books, and, all of a sudden you're walking around and you're doing everything this guy says. Of course there's a price. What do you think it's gonna be?" Well, it's his dignity, his love for his daughter, and his soul. So he thinks he's got dignity. He's got his dignity back because he can walk. Um, but actually he's just this guy's servant. And we find out that the guy, Molisar, doesn't actually want to kill uh, Potler and the rest of them. In fact, he wants to take over their thing. He loves that this is happening. There's war on the planet, the whole planet. He wants to take over everything, and he wants the whole world to burn so that he can like feed on the darkness and he can like restore everything to chaos. Right. So it's like Ordo ab Caio ab Ordo or something. It's like a reversal of everything back to what is this? Is this the eschaton? I mean, this is like it's obviously a Gnostic, it's sort of it becomes a Gnostic allegory, right? Because everything about these dudes is fits into like a Gnostic paradigm of the Archons. Like they're beams of light, and it's light and darkness, and he's in this literal prison, and he wants to escape the prison, and if he can do that, he can make everything perfect again because the demiurge made this. Well, we also find out, by the way, that uh, the keep was actually not built by Molisar. It's another lie. It was built by Glaken, and Glaken threw him down there and built the keep around him and put the symbol of the hilt of his light beam Gnostic sword. And that is what like keeps him in the castle. And so you're wondering, uh, hello, hello, Glaken, why didn't you just kill this dude the last time you fought, which was like during Vlad, right? Well, um, the reason that he didn't kill him then, he didn't destroy him, was that he thought that if he destroyed this guy, then he would also be destroyed because there would be no more purpose for him. And the illuminate, confirm, light, the light side would triumph, but he would have no more purpose. So what? Right? So it's like, okay, well, I thought this guy was serving the light being that shall not be named, because when she asked him, "Do you serve God? Are you an angel? What are you?" He's like, "No." And you're like, "What? What is this? Why not just make it that?" Right? Why not just make it that uh that Glaken is like, I don't know, he's Saint Michael, and he's gonna whoop this bragging dude's ass, right? Well, I guess because that's a whole different story. Anyway, um, so he's a photon archon beam of light dude with a lightsaber, and he goes down into the bowels of the keep, and now we see Nazi zombies. So there's reanimation. We learned that Molasar is also a necromancer. He's a primordial necromancer from the first age, and that he can make the dead rise, and they serve him. And there's all these rats and all this stuff, and and they surround Glaken, and he's mowing them down. And there's carnage everywhere, um, which is sort of a horror trope that he throws in. There's got to be a big climactic battle, but instead of just like a Ragnarok, right? There's zombies involved. There's Nazi zombie vampire archon um, uh, 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 lightsaber battles going on. So so finally, Glaken's like, in this battle, Glaken's like, you know what? I gotta do away with this dude. Uh, I can't just keep doing this forever, so I might as well take care of him now. It's kind of the is essentially like what you get out of it. And in the climactic battle, like he runs his photon saber through what's his face, and he like dissipates into chaotic ash, and he's gone. Well, then guess what? There's a happy ending. Glaken does not disappear. He thinks he's gonna, just kind of absorb into the force or whatever, but instead, he realizes that now he's a mortal man, right? And because he's a mortal man, what can he do? He can go back and he can make love and sex Magna all day long, and they can live a happy life together in the Carpathian Mountains, or go anywhere they want, because he's still got all of his gold. And that's the happy ending. So that is the book, The Keep, sort of mixed in with the mixed in with the film. Now, some things about the film. Um, One, the production of this movie was notorious, because this was like the prime example of an early '80s movie getting completely out of control. This is like y I can just picture, like, that scene in Tropic Thunder where, Tom Cruise is like, "Where's the key grip? I want you to go him and punch him in the face," right? "Sorry, man," and he punches Steve Coogan, like, harder than, like, anyone's ever been. And of course, it's the key grip. He's like this big Hawaiian dude. Well, anyway, that happened on the set apparently, and it ran away, the money, everything, and finally, when they finished the production, the producers back in the studio were like, this movie is 255 minutes long. Like, we got to cut this thing." So they just cut the whole movie. And since then, all the nerds have been wanting Michael Mann to release a director's cut of the film. And that's interesting also, by the way, because I learned I got a good take on the director's cut from, I was watching an interview with, who was it? I think it was Tarantino. And Tarantino was spurging out about film, and he said basically that there's not really such thing as a director's cut, because, and of course there is. I mean, like, the director has to fight for final cut. Stanley Kubrick always had final cut, except for Eyes Wide Shut, because he had a heart attack. Um, Very strange, right? And then they cut a bunch of the film, and then they released the film, and people are like, "There's something missing in this film," and I do think that that's probably true. That's probably accurate. That there is something very spicy that's missing from Eyes Wide Shut. And anyway, but who knows? Who knows? But anyway, they cut the film, and so you're kind of like, "What's happening here?" Another thing was that Oh, this is also that thing we mentioned before in so many of these analyses that, um, F. Paul Wilson was not happy with the film version of his book. Well, dude, then don't sell the rights to the book, right? I mean, if you want the money and you want to sell the rights to the book, they're going to make the movie and they're probably going to change it. And that's of course what they did. Um, but they made sort of a completely different film, and it is strange. It is a bizarre film, but I got to say like the best part of the movie is the score. The soundtrack to the movie is amazing because it's Tangerine Dream, and it's like it's funny watching it because there was a long period of time where I bet if you watch this movie, you would be like, "What is this soundtrack? It doesn't work, and it's like too synthy, and it just doesn't work at all." It's kind of like when you watch what's the movie? Is it Gallipoli? The Mel Gibson, the base Mel movie Gallipoli with the soundtrack by who did that one? Was it Vangelis? It was either Vangelis or Jarre or somebody, but it's like a no, was it Moroder? Maybe it's Giorgio Moroder. Anyway, you watch those movies and you're like, "What is this? Why is this dude running?" And it's Gallipoli and it's World War One, but there's like a synth soundtrack that's very strange. It's not like Vangelis's Chariots of Fire, right, which has elements of non sort of synth music in it. But the soundtrack now you watch it and you're like, "Holy shit, this soundtrack is so amazing." I mean, it really is amazing. It's like perfect for this film. And in fact, there's a I didn't realize till I went back and looked that um this band, you probably never heard of this band right here. This band, Small Black, who's still around, they put out a mixtape in 2011. It's called Moon Killer, and you can listen on YouTube. It's not on the big things. It's on YouTube though, and it's on SoundCloud. Anyway, it's like 10 songs, and it's like I love this album. It's really good, and it's very sort of chill wave. It's just a synth band. It's like it's a sort of electronic, it's just a synth, not synth pop, but it's just like a sort of a chill synth wavy band with this mixtape. And that image right there on the cover is from the Keep, of course. So that is a dude running out of the Keep from this like doorway into Illuminate Confirmism, and it's glowing because he's trying to get out of where the dark light of Molasar is. So, of course, Molasar has the glowing red eyes of the, demon Archon, whereas what's his name? Glaken, his name is Glaken, Scott Glenn, has the glowing white eyes of the avenging angel. But in the book, he's not an avenging angel, he's another one of these dudes. So yeah, so Small Black's Moon Killer that came out in like 2011. Great mixtape. And I wish I could play it. Of course, that's the one thing we can't do here. And so yeah, check that out. And the movie came out in 1983, and it's like pure Tangerine Dream. Tangerine Dream has done like a bunch of soundtracks. They're still around. I don't think they have all their original members. They're what is Tangerine Dream? Are they German or Austrian or something? And it's just like 3 dudes with, um, you know, uh, like sequential circuits and Yamahas and, and Moogs and all this stuff. And it's just all synth, and they're like very influential. Every, especially artist who uses synth or any kind of electronic musician, will say like, yes, Tangerine Dream rules. And the best, like you might know him because that song "Love on a Real Train" is so good. It's from the Tom Cruise movie, Risky Business. You guys seen that movie? Risky Business is funny because it's early Tom Cruise and it's got, Booger from Revenge of the Nerds in it as his best friend, and Tom Cruise is like this I guess is he in high school? He's a high schooler, and it's like it's weird because it's before Ferris Bueller, and it's sort of the same theme, but his goal in the movie is like to lose his card to this let's call her a working girl, right? And what's the name of the girl in the movie, the blonde lady? She was also super hot. She's in The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. Wow, that's a weird reference if you've ever seen that one. Probably if has anybody here seen The Hand That Rocks the Cradle? What's her name? Dude, I'm really bad with the actresses' names tonight. What's her name? Somebody in chat. What's the lady's name in Risky Business? The hot lady, the blonde lady. Well, anyway, there's a scene where Tom Coombe, you know, there's the famous like weird sort of creepy, uh, tidy whitey scene, which is very strange. And he's singing with the thank you, Rebecca De Mornay. Shouts out to Kristen out there, Slow Boy Whiteboard, Rebecca De Mornay. And he's like sliding in his socks on the floor, right? And he's like Tom Coombe, and he's got his Wayfarers on. And another weird thing, Tom Coombe is like responsible for two different kinds of Ray Bans, like and their advertising popularity, right? One is the Ray Ban Wayfarer, right, from some uh, risky business. And again, like, what is he doing? Like, this couldn't have been a thing even in the '80s. That like you're home alone and like you're a teen and you're in your tidy whities, like sliding on the floor with your socks on, singing in the broom. That's weird. Who did that? Who's ever done that? Well, I guess Tom Coombe did it. And then the other one, of course, his other famous sunglasses movie is uh, Pop Coombe, right? That's the Aviators. That's the Bo Jiden Aviators, made famous by Bo Jiden. So anyway, how did I get into that? Hold on, let me get back to this. I don't know how I got into talking about Tom Coombe and the Shades. Um, oh, you know what else? I think Tangerine Dream did the soundtrack to the classic, 1986 movie Legend. Have you guys seen that? Where Tom Coombe plays a uh, fantastical dude battling the weird Kim Curry Satan demon who also appears in what is it, Childhood's End? Dude, the '80s are wild. I was just thinking about the other day about because I did the last stream on Space Lizards and I did that stream on Flight of the Navigator and The Last Starfighter and all that, and Enemy Mine. Enemy Mine isn't disturbing like that. That actually holds up. Flight of the Navigator again is like so. If you saw it when you're a kid and you go back and you watch it, it is like mind blowing what you see when you watch it. It's really weird. But I used to love that movie. What's up to my sister? Shouts out to my sister. And yeah, so that made me think of another crazy '80s movie that is like super disturbing, and that is the Never Ending Story. Because the Never Ending, I don't know what you guys think of the Never Ending Story, but of course, the Never Ending Story has like one of the most disturbing scenes of all time, right? With the horse. That scene like sucks. Still can't watch that. And I watched that and I'm like, "Oh, my cigarette." They changed cigarettes so that you guys probably don't remember this if you're from a younger generation or if you even, whatever. You're probably vaping. But like 20 years ago, they changed cigarettes so that they would be so they would be like fireproof in terms of like forest fires. So if you don't like take drags on the cigarette, it'll go out. Did you know that? They didn't used to always be like that. So anyway, um, but yeah, Never Ending Story is weird and it's got, it also has a good synthy soundtrack. But and it was like revitalized with, Stranger Things, season 3 or whatever. But that's like a really weird, dark movie that I always was like, I was just disturbed. in the very first part of the movie, like, because he's up in the attic and he, like, discovers this book, and then he's reading it, and then the lightning striking, and I always thought that was too weird. Another movie, I don't know if this will be an unpopular take, but another movie that I really don't like, I've never liked it, I understand the thing about it and the nostalgia and all that stuff, but that I never liked even from the beginning is E.T. I never liked E.T. I always thought it was weird, like, from the very beginning. I didn't like what E.T. looked like. I didn't like that he was an alien like that. I didn't like his finger. I didn't like his voice. I didn't like that DARPA comes to the house and sets up the, like, testing facility. I didn't like that at all, even when I was a little kid. I didn't like that I never liked that he put E.T. in, like, the basket on the front of the, bike. Because I thought that was, like, super uncool. I would watch it and I'd be like, "This bike kinda sucks, and, like, what is this basket? And what's this hood you have on?" Like, I thought that was really, like, not cool. What I did think was cool was Gleaming the Cube. Gleaming the Cube rocks. That movie rocks. 'Cause the friend, Christian Slater's friend, like, has the underground room. His room is like an underground bunker that you have to, like, climb a ladder into, and he's got that half pipe. I thought that was super cool. Um Have you guys ever seen that movie Roller Boys? I think that's what it's called. I think it's Corey Haim and them, and they're roller skating in a post-apocalyptic dystopia, and there's this scene where, like, they gotta, like, jump over this chasm, and they, like, do this circle where they're holding each other's hands, and they, like, throw them, and they, like, jump over this thing. I thought that was like, interesting when I was younger. The Wraith, somebody mentioned The Wraith. Yeah, The Wraith is, like, a pretty good movie. That movie has a different title in the UK. That's the first time I ever saw it, actually, and it's got early Charles Sheen in it as uh, a space car, right? And he's got that, like, super cool gun and that helmet. That's a cool movie. Um, is it Solar Babies? They're roller skating in the desert. Yeah, that might be it. Solar Babies or Roller Babies or something like that. Um, yeah. Anyway, so the other movie what else do you guys wanna know about this book? Before I get on to this other one that I was gonna do. I mean, there are some good passages. This is probably the one book that, like, that I haven't cited any specific passages from, because it's not I mean, like, the part where he talks about being a boyar is cool. Um, he says well, I'll give you this passage. This is page 207 of the book. This is the best chapter in the book. He says Cusa is, like, at his table, he's got his, like, stuff ready on the table for Molisar to come back, and he says, "The only illumination was the cone of light from the hooded bulb overhead, the only sound his own breathing." Of course, it's supposed to be illumination because he's, like, in the this is a Illuminate confirmed book. And suddenly he knew he was not alone. Before he saw anything, he felt it, a malign presence beyond his field of vision, beyond his capacity to describe it. That's kinda cool because it's like he's got second sight. It was simply there. Then the darkness began, different this time. Last night, it had pervaded the very air of the room, growing and spreading from everywhere. Tonight, he watched it invade by a different route, slowly, insidiously seeping through the walls, blotting them from his view, closing in on him. That's pretty cool. Um, and then he says, "Show yourself." So he speaks to him. First, Molisar speaks in Old Slavonic, of course, and he says, so he makes him show himself. So you're like, okay, it's a demon, right? Um, and what are y'all saying? I'm 42. Yes, I'm 42. Uh, I can speak a more modern form of our language. The words derive from a root version of the Daco-Romanian dialect spoken in the region at the time the keep was built. The darkness on the far side of the little table began to recede. A shape took form out of the black. Cusa immediately recognized the face and the eyes from last night, and then the rest of the figure became visible. A giant of a man stood before him, at least 6.5 feet tall, broad shouldered, standing proudly, defiantly, legs spread, hands on hips. A floor length cloak, as black as his hair and eyes, was fastened about his neck with a clasp of jeweled gold. Beneath that, Cusa could see a loose red blouse, possibly silk, loose black breeches that looked like jodhpurs, and high boots of rough brown leather. It was all there: power, decadence, ruthlessness. Um, and he explains how he knows the old tongue. Um, he says on page 209, you were a boyar? Yes, one of the few who stayed with Vlad, the one they call Tepes, the Impaler, until his end outside Bucharest. So Tepes apparently means impaler. Even though he had expected such an answer, Cusa was still aghast. That was in 1476, almost 5 centuries ago. Are you that old? I was there. But so he doesn't answer, right? He's not that, he's actually older than that. But where have you been since the 15th century? Here, but why? I was being pursued by Turks. Molisar's eyes narrowed, leaving only the endless black of his pupils showing. No, by others, madmen who would pursue me across the world to destroy me. I knew I could not outrun them forever. He smiled here, revealing long, tapered, slightly yellowed teeth, none of them particularly sharp, but all strong looking. So I decided to outweight them. I built this keep, arranged for its maintenance, and hid myself away. So actually, he's lying here because remember, he didn't build the keep himself. Glaken built the keep, and the reason that the locals have like always taken care of it is because they're paid in gold coins, and they don't know where the gold comes from. They just know it's deposited in a bank in Switzerland, but they don't know anything else about it and they can't figure it out. And it has always been like that since there's been, uh, coins because Glaken pays for this. Now, the other thing I didn't mention is that Glaken is part of a secret society. They're a secret sect that Molisar explains has, of course, infiltrated all of the power things in the whole world. And Molisar tries to, like, say that these guys are the Luminate bad guys, but they're sort of then they're supposed to be we kind of figure later on that, are these guys like the Great White Brotherhood? Are these guys, the Blavatsky people? Are they the Watchers? What are they? And they never age, and nobody knows who they are, and then, of course, Cusa is like, "Well, I've never heard of them, and I've heard of everything, and I'm totally into conspiracies, and, I know all about the Illuminate Confirmed." And Molisar's like, "No, you don't, because if you knew of them, then they wouldn't be powerful." So, of course, they have no name, and you don't know of them, but they have, like, secret rights. And then he tries to pass it off like these are the Nazis, which you kind of buy into for a little while because, they have their order, right? Their capital O order, but that's not who they are, and Glaken is, like, also from the beginning of time. Um, and so that's interesting in the book. What else is cool? Cusa the point where Cusa is sort of it's again, it's like an inversion of being, it's like an inversion of Lazarus because he is alive, he's not dead, but he's, like, living a death sentence because, number 1, he's got a terminal illness, and he knows that he's gonna die if he doesn't make it to the death camp where he's gonna die anyway. And in fact, Molisar, uses him because he can sense the cancer inside of his body, killing him. He says, he calls him frail one throughout the book. Um, the the thing I really liked about this, um, was uh, that it ends up being a vampire book, even though it's not a book about vampires. And it is kinda interesting how he does that because he specifically says he tries to, like, not make it a book about vampires, and specifically says, like, "No, we're not vampires. They do this, we do this." So, it's like he's trying to write some kind of, prequel origin story for what vampires are, which is kinda interesting, especially, when it was published. Now, of course, we've seen so many of these, and there's, like, an endless cycle of vampire stories and vampire-related things, but what I did like about it is that he does kind of get to um, the subtext or the deeper symbolism of like what vampires represent, what vampirical uh things are supposed to represent, right? They're kind of like AJ, like well, he's from the bloodline of, Vlad from the Dracos, right? They feed on negative energy. They're interdimensional beings. So that is what they are in the book. They're like interdimensional beings feeding on the life force of the good. But of course, it's like pure Gnosticism where it's the good and the bad are equal sided and they're like opposing forces always at war with not with one another. And and so anyway, so that is The Keep by F. Paul Wilson. And I would recommend the movie, especially if you like um Michael Mann. I mean, I love Michael Mann movies. Like Heat is what it is. I mean, it's, we've done Heat here. Even the movie Black Hat is not bad. That's not a bad movie. His Miami Vice reboot is decent for what it is. It was people didn't think it was good when it came out, but it is pretty good. Because for one thing, like those are his characters. Michael Mann created Miami Vice, the show, so he's allowed to do that. He's allowed to reboot it. So would who recommend the Atari game? The video game that I would recommend would be I would recommend Mortal Kombat 2 on Sega Genesis. People hearing this are going to be like, "Dude, that is so lame." What's crazy about gaming is that like all of a sudden, video games like kind of changed in the early 2000s. Like Xbox came out, and the PlayStations got more PlayStations came out, and they just sort of. I was too not too old, but I just like, I was like, whatever, I didn't care. And I let them pass me by, and all of a sudden, like 20 years have gone by, and like video games are like, that's where people drop their top secret things in the servers for the gamers, right? Um, and yeah, so some 25-year-old gamer hacker did that and then put it in there for his friends to share. Okay, sure. But that would be the place where these things would be stored. So I just think it's interesting because like gaming becomes war gaming, which becomes meta war gaming, and the metaverse and the gaming world mirror the real world, or predict it, right? Obviously. So yeah, Mortal Kombat 2 on Sega Genesis. All right, here's what a nerd I was. I got Mortal Kombat 2 on Sega Genesis in 1990, like 1993. And I was so obsessed with this game. Like with my best friend would come over and we would play this game and we like could not stop playing it, of course, till we beat the game. And we would take turns like with the characters. And I went, I got my mom to take me to the mall and I went into like a Nintendo Power store and I bought a cheat code book of Mortal Kombat 2, and it had all the cheat codes in it, and then I beat the game. So I learned the babality. Wah, wah. You turn Baraka into a baby and the animality. And anyway, that was cool. And then of course, I have to be I'm not bragging, folks, but I have to be the first person to ever play Tony Hawk Pro Skater because my first year in college, we were studying for exams, and my next door neighbors in the dorm, my friend Steven, who I only called, well, okay, so here's what happened. We ordered like a pizza because we were studying, and in the Pizza Hut, inside it, you opened it up, and it had a Pizza Hut sampler of this game for PlayStation called Tony Hawk Pro Skater. And it was just the one board, right, where he's got the half pipe and all that. And it didn't have any other boards. It was just that. And dude, we played this game like like so much. We could not stop playing the game until we beat like the high score of all time. And there was no high score, but we just had to like we had to break 10,000, then we had to break 50,000, then 100,000. And and he called me Tony. I'd call him Tony. I'd leave a note on his little door, and I'd say like, "All right, Tony, what time you want to come over and play Tony?" And he would come over, and we'd sit in my chairs in my dorm room, and we would play Tony Hawk and drink Andre. And and we had this thing where like when you started, if you didn't start and get like 4 moves right away when you started, like on the half pipe, then you would hit pause and then reset. And we had to get a rule about how many times we reset it. Like you can't reset it again. I get to play this time. And so we like reset it 3 times and then the other guy would play. And like we did it. I mean, like we killed this game. And I ended up playing the game. We both ended up playing the game all night before the exams and not studying for the exams. But the but it didn't matter because I'd already done all the work like throughout the semester, so I didn't really need to study, and I killed the exams. But then when the exam was over, we went right back to the dorm room and started playing Tony again. So my sister can attest to that. Um, Shouts out to my sister. She's the only girl I've known in my whole life who like is amazing at video games, and she's really good. Um, so yeah, Tony Hawk Pro Skater, uh, Mortal Kombat 2, Sega Genesis, and Miss Pac-Man. I don't know. Never ever played Call of Duty. I've never played any of those games. The last game I played like that, this is how old I am. The last game I played like that was either Perfect Dark on Nintendo 64 or Bond. And like we would always go to my friend Spencer's after school and play Bond. And 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 like we would always fight. We would always end up fighting each other because like whoever got the golden gun first, like obviously killed the whole game. So then we would always end up fighting each other. Um, but yeah, so that's video games. So there is one more movie I thought I would cover. I was debating whether to make this another stream. How long have we been going here? What are we at? An hour and a half. So do you want me to take like another I don't know, 20 minutes or so and cover a different movie? I've got another movie. Um and I think this is totally unrelated, but I think it'll be extra fun here for all of the basement breathalyzers here in the audience. Um Yeah, Perfect Dark was good. I played Perfect Dark because I was in Europe and, like, for some reason that fit more than, like, the thing about, GoldenEye, like, it wasn't as good over there. So Perfect Dark is, like, a better version of GoldenEye. So, so, um, so in Perfect Dark, my character would always be let's call him a little person guy with like the head of the old boomer man, like with a yellow Moonraker jumpsuit, and like it was the El Presidente. All right, so the next one I'm gonna do is a movie that just came out, and I saw it, and it's called Cocaine Bear. Have you guys seen this movie? Have you heard of this movie? I'm sure you've heard of it. The reason I thought maybe I'd talk about it is because there is an interesting element of conspiracy and Luminate conformism in the movie, even though it's a silly movie and it's a comedy and it's directed by Elizabeth Banks and all this stuff. But it's actually like I really enjoyed the movie. It's funny and it's like it's not like, crass. It's like a fun movie, and it's like it's kind of I don't know, it's kinda refreshing in a way, not to get too, lame about it, but, it was kind of refreshing because it's like what movies are supposed to be in a way because, it's like just pure, like, entertainment. It's just, like, fun, not really spectacle that much. I mean, the bear is CGI, and they have to do that in the movie because of what happens. But it is pretty good. So, I'm gonna go get another Red Bull, and when I come back, let's do, CB. You wanna do that? You wanna do, Tony Montana Yayo Bear? Alright, I'll be right back. Alright, we're back. Okay, you guys ready? We good? Alright, so you like my lines? Okay, yeah, shouts out to Jerry out there, homeboy Jerry. Alright, so here's what the movie's about. So the movie is called Cocaine Bear, and, um, and it's directed by Elizabeth Banks. I'm just doing this just off the top of the dome here. So I just saw it the other day, and, it was on the TV. I got it somehow on the TV. I didn't have to go to the cinema, even though it's in the cinema. Um, and, so it's directed by Elizabeth Banks and whatever. But first off, it's interesting because it's got, like, the core cast of The Americans in it, and shouts out to, JD at Jay's Analysis because he did the uh, great analysis of that show, The Americans, which it really is a great show. And in fact, that was one of the shows that I had not seen before the analysis, and that made me go watch it. It's a great show. But it's got what's her name, Felicity in it, the main woman and her husband. They're both in it, and then it's got the old woman who plays like the handler. She's in it. It's got a great cast. The movie has a great cast. And so what happens is basically the movie starts and we immediately go uh into we get the first notes of Jefferson Starship, that song Jane, which is like perfect for this movie and is I love like, when I used to go to the movies, especially, going to the movies and sitting in the theater and all of a sudden yeah, Carrie Russell, thank you. Shouts out to, Phone Punk. Um, I love, like, when an unexpected song comes on in a movie that is ordinarily, like, I would never pick it, and there's just something about, like, great music in movies. I'm not talking about, like, the score but like great, just sort of deep cuts or songs in movies. And this comes on, and we see right away we've got a plane, and the plane's flying, and we see that what's Carrie Russell's husband's name? The dude who's in the Americans, the main guy, the Englishman, and you can tell it's him, even though he's got this mustache, and it's 1985. He's got these shades on, and he's supposed to look like DB he's supposed to kinda look like DB Cooper, but he's different. But he's, like, kinda geared out like DB Cooper, the dude who, like, did the heist. Remember the airline heist and then jumped out of the plane, parachuted, and disappeared? Um, that dude, by the way, was clearly that it's unsolved or whatever, but that dude was clearly, um, either it was one of the 3 letters, right? Probably the three-letter thing, and, funnily enough, this guy also in real life is tied into that. And this guy's real name was Andrew, I think Andrew Thornton. He's a real guy. And so what he's doing is he's in the back of the plane. He's got like these bags like stacked up. They're the duffel bags. They obviously are the Pablo bags. And he's going to be making his drop. And you know, this is the kind of drop that we heard about uh, through uh, um, through Larry Nichols. Remember when Larry Nichols the the first time I saw Killer, she was, that's more of an AJ voice. What does Larry sound like? "Into the carcass of a pumpkin." Right? Larry Nichols in his, great documentary about the Hillary couple talks about the drops over Mena, Arkansas, and, there's a good movie about that also. Of course, there's the Tom Coon movie, American Made, but there's another movie about Barry Seal with, Dennis Hopper. It's Dennis Hopper. It was an HBO movie, like, in the '90s, and it's about Barry Seal. Came out, like, not long after he was assassinated. Um, Dennis Hopper, "Can't tell the difference between real life and the movies, man." When he showed up in Apocalypse Now. Anyway, so dude's in the back of the plane, and he's gonna be making his drop. He's checking his watch, and it's funny, like, that part of the movie, that sequence is probably the funniest part of the movie. It was for me, because, like, the dude is so funny dropping these bags out. Like, he takes the bag and he's like karate chopping the duffel bags like out the plane, and he cuts one of them open. He does a quick uh a quick huff of like a kilo, um, and then he's he puts on his parachute and he's about to jump out of the plane, but then bam, he hits his head on the plane and then falls out of the plane. Well, in real life, what happened was, and they show the real footage. This old timer is sitting. He's at home and he walks out onto his driveway to get the newspaper, and there's a body like in the driveway. In where was this? This was in Knoxville, Tennessee. A coffee can. He got it. A coffee can in Knoxville, Tennessee. Gave it to an old airman named Wanaki. Just watch. It was your father's birthright. What movie's that from? Every time I drive through or think of Knoxville, I think of that movie. Coffee can in Knoxville, Tennessee. Um, so anyway, this is in Knoxville, and this really did happen. The guy found this body in his driveway. And so, the cops came or whatever, and it was clear right away. This wasn't like some regular good job. Good job, adaptable. You win. You get the dubs tonight. So what happened is, they're like, "Who is this guy?" Because he had on, first of all, he was like, kind of a big guy. The parachute had failed, obviously, and either he was knocked out on the way down or like out of the plane, or just the parachute didn't open. I don't think the emergency chute deployed. Yes, it is. Yes, good job, digital minefield, real Cooter Brown. It is the actual bluegrass conspiracy, and that's the real thing. That's what it's called. And, he had, I think he had, like, a 9 millimeter and some other weapon on him. He had a bunch of cash. He had a duffel bag with, like, 20 million dollars worth of cocaine in the bag, and he had on shades. He had, like, altimeter thing or whatever, on his watch. He had like a flashlight strapped, some sort of flashlight beacon strapped to his boot or strapped to his ankle. And then in the newspaper, they reported that, yeah, Knoxville. That's what I say, Knoxville. In the movie, he says in Knoxville, Tennessee. Knoxville. That's the way my mom would uh, correct everyone, to make sure they said it right too. Because, well, I won't say any more about that, but she would know. So anyway, so in the newspaper, they reported that he had on, strangely enough, the thing that everybody sort of tacked onto was that he had on Gucci. He had like Gucci loafers on, and then it kind of later came out that like the reporter who wrote that, so it was reported to him that the boots that he had on were like the Gucci boots of the parachuting shoe world. So they weren't really Gucci loafers, but it's kind of cooler to think that they were Gucci loafers. And then they discovered this that the dude in the movie, like the guy who comes to investigate, the detective, who's really funny. He's like, I know exactly who that is. That's Andrew C. Thornton II. I know his full name. It's Andrew C. Thornton II. And the other cop's like, well, what's his full name? You didn't say his full name. You said Andrew C. Thornton II. What's the C stand for? So this is this guy who in real life, this guy was, a scion of the he was a scion of the, Kentucky, horse breeder world, right? And he, came from a really good family, went to private school, he went off to college, then he joined the military, he wasn't in Nam, he was in the invasion of the Dominican Republic, but he, like, was a real, adrenaline junkie guy. He, became a cop, so which is weird for them, he became a cop, and then what he liked doing was he met this other dude that he'd gone to school with who was like, or no, he met another guy who was like a real, like, legit tough guy, and he was a cop, and they started basically, like, infiltrating the student groups of the '60s and finding out where their supply came from for that dirty devil's lettuce. Is that what y'all are doing out here? Smoking the devil's lettuce in the moonlight? Is that what y'all do? Smoke the devil's lettuce in the moonlight. So, it's just so funny to think of this, like, that's what they were infiltrating in the '60s. It's like, what? But anyway, that's what they did, and then, the people they were working with started to figure out that, like, the constant supply of the, bubonic chronic on the streets or the, boomer '60s Mexican dirtweed was actually coming probably from him. So he was shaking people down and then reselling it, classic, corrupt cop style. And then there was an investigation and so he left the cops and he had something to do with like the DEA, of course. But then he had his pilot's license and he started he like cutting out the middleman and wholesale buying like dirty weed or whatever from Florida and flying it up the coast to Kentucky. Well, then he met somebody else, and then that guy was connected to organized crime, but it was a guy that he'd gone to school with, private school. And so then that guy introduced him to Colombia. So he flew his plane all the way down to Colombia. He met up with the dudes and he started shipping Chi-Chi's Yayo up to through, Florida, across like Georgia, across the North Carolina border and into Kentucky. And then the night this happened, he was making drops in Georgia, like in the one of the national forests or whatever. Well, then the story became about the fact that when he did that, he fell out of the plane, and then the plane crashed like 100 miles away. So they realized it was probably him. And then later they found a bear and the bear had, like, found one of the bags and opened it up and had, like, consumed a bunch of the product. And so the bear had, like, OD'd. And so that's where the movie comes from, right? Well, the movie's pretty good because they go into that, but what happens is uh, Carrie Russell is, a single mother or whatever, and she's working the night shifts, and she has this sort of, I guess, preteen kid, this daughter, and the daughter's pretty cool. Like she's got like Billy Idol posters on her wall or whatever, and she and her friend decide to go out into they go on a hike and they want to go paint the waterfall or something. And when they go out there, they and a bunch of other people like converge in the woods because they're all after they just happen to be there or whatever. Ice Cube's son is in this, and he plays like a enforcer or whatever for Ray Liotta. This is Ray Liotta's last movie. Shouts out to Mav out there who says bong rips and Michael Mann clips. Respect. BRs and double M clips. Thank you for that $20 super chat. Really appreciate that. Um, so Ray Liotta, yeah, it's his last movie. He plays a likable rogue who says, "We missed the drop. We missed the shipment. It's somewhere out in Georgia. You got to go get it." So he sends the dude who played the young Han Solo, who's also really good in this because he's grieving the death of his wife. And there's a scene where they're in the bar, and he's like, the bartender like takes the he's like, "That's your last shot for the day," and he's like crying in the bar, and O'Shea Jackson, Ice Cube's son, shows up and he's like, "Come on, we gotta go do this." And he looks at him and he's like, "I'm just so fucking sad, man." And it's so he's like, "Man, get up." So they go and they're supposed to go into the woods and look for this, the shipment or whatever. And when they do that, they get he gets accosted. Ice Cube's son gets accosted by these three, like they're supposed to be, like punks or something, but they're kinda Skittles, and he beats him up in the bathroom at the forest, and then there's this forestry woman, and she's this old bag, she's the one from the Americans, and she wants to go on a date with this guy. There's an Icelandic guy who's there with his, fiancée, and they're looking at the woods, and this part's good because the fiancée is so annoying, and he's like, "I just want to look at the woods," and she's like telling him that she's trying to like commandeer what the wedding's going to be like. And then they see the bear and the bear is obviously demented, right? Um, Jesse says, does Bays want super chats through YouTube or does he something like a Streamlabs or something he preferred way for super chats? Yeah, actually, any way you want to super chat me is great, but I would prefer that it's through one of those links that my homeboy Jerry just dropped there because they get direct to me. You can also drop them through the Dono chat, dono.chat. That's a great way to do it because that'll get to me pretty directly. So, and you can leave a message there. That would also be good. The super chats are great. I love those, but they they take a big portion and they take a long time to get to me. So, yeah, I would really appreciate that. But I also you guys don't care about this or need to know this, but there's one thing about the S chats that you might not know, and that's that I don't know if it's just if it's for everybody or whatever. I'm a smaller channel, but there's like a threshold you got to meet every month. So you got to make a certain amount before they'll give it to you. Otherwise, they hold it for another month. So I got to make like another think $50 or something in the next few days to make that money at all, and I won't even see it for another month. So but whatever, that doesn't matter. Anyway, you guys want to support me, you want to smash the like or share the stream or leave me a comment afterwards or just join us here in the chat. I appreciate any way you want to support me. Um, so I'll try not to get too much into the weeds and the what the movie's about, but um, so he beats up the gang. Then they got to go look. They found one of the bags, and so he's got to go looking for that. Meanwhile, the kids find one of the bags, and there's a funny scene with that where the little boy claims that like he's a badass, and he says, "No, I do this all the time," and she's like, "No, you don't." And then they she gets kidnapped by the bear, and the bear has gotten into the product and is now is a total fiend for this, right? And so the bear is like demented and running around. And one of the things they obviously did in the movie was they made the bear the villain, but actually they flipped it and they obviously made the human beings the villain, right? Now, that's cute in the movie, and it is kind of I mean, it is their fault, but it's also like when the Icelandic woman sees the bear, she's like taking pictures and he's like, "We need to walk away. If it's brown, lay down. If it's black, fight back. And so don't run." And of course, the lady runs, right? And so the bear goes after her and then kills the woman. And it's actually you're watching it and you're like, okay, that's not bad actually, because this woman was like really annoying. Uh, so yes, says Jerry. Yeah, Jerry says, how do you do it? Yeah, that is a pretty funny scene. And because it's it's cute, it's clever, and it's innocent, and you just it's a movie, so it's not real. And let's see, Maddie says, I always forget how long super chats take to come through. Got to start donating directly. Well, yeah, the super chats take like they're a month behind. So this is behind the scenes inside baseball of the thing that everybody else does. So for instance, like if the period is over, like, I don't know, late April, then you don't get it until late May, and then if you don't make the threshold, it won't be till June. So, that's the thing. Yes, the Icelandic people were so ridiculous. It was like Sven and Helga or something. I liked the old bag, the woman, because when, when Carrie Russell goes in and she's like, "I'm looking for my daughter. She went camping here and she's, or hiking and she's disappeared." The woman's like, she's like, "We don't take anybody, everybody's got to be, have adult supervision. So we get a lot of runaways, a lot of strays here." And she's like, yeah, lady, she's none of those things. And you also know that because the woman is armed, she's going to misfire and she's going to take out a bunch of people. One of the other good scenes was when the paramedics come to the shed or whatever, and because there's gunshots and they've called it whatever. So the paramedics show up, and the dude with the mustache who goes and opens the back door and looks and he says it's a bear and he closes the door. Um, that dude is that guy. He's a comedian, Scott Seiss. He's the guy who you probably didn't realize this watching it, but he's the guy who, like, during the Karanka, was always I didn't have TikTok, but he would always be it was from TikTok, always be on like Twitter and whatever. He's the guy, "Hey, do you mind staying a little late? We're late." "Yes, I do mind. I do mind. You think I work here? You think I work here for the" He's that guy. The guy who's always annoyed with the short clips. So he's in the movie and it's actually pretty funny how they do it because they cannot get away from this bear. and, the old woman gets her thing, she falls out of the ambulance, her face gets crushed in the road. The entire movie also was filmed in Ireland. Did you know that? Shouts out to Crisp out there in the old country. It was all filmed in, like, County Wicklow and somewhere else, and once you realize that, like, for me, once I realized that, I could tell because, even it's funny because even the trees have a different look. There's only, like, okay, how can I put this? I've said this before, like, when my best friend from Northern Ireland came over here to visit, the first thing he, like, noticed about Virginia especially was that he was like, "I've never seen so many trees. Why are there so many trees?" So we do have this, like, it's the new world and all the trees haven't been cut down and there are a lot of trees. And so in Ireland and Northern Ireland, there aren't that many, like, I don't wanna say there aren't that many trees, but the forests are, like, where you see trees, right? So, not really in the Mournes, but I guess in Wicklow and other places, so they have that. Um, and but they did a obviously, they do a good job of decorating the set and all that, and they make it look like Georgia. Um, and what else? So they go and they find the bear, and the bear, like, the kid climbs the tree, and he's like, "I did this to escape from the bear. Bears can't climb trees." And the guy's like, "That's what they can do." And there's a funny scene where, like, the bear is climbing up the tree, and he's, like, going towards the little kid, and you realize watching this, by the way, that the bear is not after the people, he's after the product. So that's, like, sort of the moral in the thing that, this is there's an '80s, anti-drug element in the movie that's kind of satirized because it turns beasts into wild beasts, I guess. They literally show the "This is your brain on drugs" scene in the movie, and if you were alive at the time, you obviously vividly remember those commercials. But they did show one commercial that I'd totally forgotten about, and they show the egg and this is your brain on drugs," and they show the egg cracking in the pan, in the frying pan, and then they show Nancy Reagan and Pee Wee Herman. First of all, they show Pee Wee Herman holding a vial of the white lady, and he's like, this he's doing his Pee Wee Herman voice, and he's like, "This is serious stuff," and you're like, "Dude, this is so crazy that they ever did this ad." Um, it's like you watch it and you're like, "This is the guy that they got?" Right? Um, yeah, so John Pro says, "This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?" And that's the part that I'd forgotten about because the guy they get for that, I don't know who the actor is, but it you watch it and you go, "Is this guy like this guy looks like geeked out while he's doing the ad. This is crazy." His chin is like over here and he's like you know, I don't know, it's some Broadway guy, right? It reminds me of the guy in The Matrix that they got to remember they hired this guy to train Obama in public speaking, um, because of his voice tone, and he's like, "This, on drugs. Any questions?" And it's like it's a long ad, it's a long, sequence, and I'd forgotten how, like, uncomfortable the ad is. But that's in the movie, and it's pretty funny because it's obviously supposed to be satirizing the whole thing. And, anyway, so whatever, the bad guys or the hitmen for Ray Liotta, who, by the way, are likable and who are just trying to do their thing, find the bag, and then the detective finds it, and then he ends up getting killed by the bear or whatever. But then finally in the movie, the real bad guy shows up, and that's of course Ray Liotta. Ray Liotta has to find it because he explains to his kid is his son, who is the young Han Solo guy. Um, and he says, like, "Look, we have to go out and find this stuff because I'm in debt to the Colombians, and these people don't mess around." So you're like, "Okay, you got to go find him." So they go and try to find him. They eventually find the bear's den, which is behind the waterfall that they'd been looking that the kid had gone to look for in the first place. And you see the bear cubs, and he starts being, like, awful with the bear cubs, and so then the other bad guys, like, turn on him, and then there's a scene where Kerry Russell, like, grabs this rifle that he has. Oh, because he shot the cop. Yeah, he had a rifle. So she grabs the rifle, she cocks it, and she's like, "I'm taking the kids out of here," and that is obviously supposed to be that she is also the mama bear protecting her kids. Um, and the bad guys are like, "Okay, we're with her." They jump through the waterfall into the pool, at the bottom, so it's not I don't think it's reading too much into this. They probably didn't intend for this to happen, but it's, because it's kind of a trope in movies. But whenever characters in movies jump into a body of water or through a waterfall and then arise new and get out of here, bug. And they're like they have a new life and they're sort of reborn. It's obviously supposed to be baptismal. So they get away. Meanwhile, Ray Liotta is fighting with the bear, and the bear disembowels him. The little baby bears feed on Ray Liotta's entrails, right? So they are consuming the bad guy. And the bear goes off and lives happily ever after, and everybody lives happily ever after. So that's the movie. That's the movie Cocaine Bear. And it's pretty well done. Because it's it's like exactly what it's supposed to be. It's like silly and stupid and but it doesn't get into the territory of like where, you know, it's stupid in the sense that it's not well done. It's like purposefully done that way where it's silly. And I think that the fact that they added like the satirical element to the film and the kind of social commentary is it could be annoying, but it's pretty well done. It's not supposed to have, like, any serious message. It's supposed to be just a silly, comedy. It's like yeah, like Jerry says, it's schlock. And, they mix kind of, violent, body horror with, satirical elements and, like, older pop music, and, it's just I think that the movie is made for obviously, it's made for, like, frat guys through, 50-year-olds probably. It's not made for, like, anybody older than that. It's certainly, like, teenagers wouldn't get it. I don't think they would like it. Yeah, it's definitely better than, Sharknado. It's cool because, like, the cast is good, the music's good, and there are, like, human elements in it that are kind of wholesome. I mean, even though these are the bad guys, they still have this element of like, they're doing this for a reason or for a purpose. They're not just, like, sort of NPC bad guys. They sort of connect with one another. They have heart, and so it's just a silly movie, but it's pretty well done. It's certainly, like it could be in the same, like, vein as the what do they call them? The frat remember the Frat Pack with Seth Rogen and all those it was weird because Frat Pack was kinda divided into 2, like, in the 2000s. You had the Will Ferrell frat pack, and then you had, like, the Vince Vaughn, Owen Wilson, and Wes Anderson frat pack, and Owen Wilson kind of crosses over because even though he's in, like, Wedding Crashers, he's also writing the Wes Anderson movies, so there's a kind of a crossover. Jesse Matthew for $5 says, "Would you or DPH ever possibly do a review on the Kubrick film Lolita or even the book? Love your content." I wish I hadn't read that name. Thank you for the super chat, appreciate you. I can say pretty definitively I will not be doing an analysis of that one. I don't you can guess why. I just don't. I mean, no. But there are I think I've mentioned before, shouts out to my homeboy out there, Matty, my other Matty, Matt. And shouts out to Lukeski out there because I shouldn't reveal too much, but we have a thing every week we meet and we're doing a thing on Kubrick and hopefully not too far in the future, we are going to produce something, not produce like a TV show, but like we're gonna have a thing, a a hard copy, like a physical journal, something literary with various analyses deconstructing Kubrick. And we're kinda working on Full Metal Jacket right now, and so we'll see how that pans out and what happens with it, but it's interesting because there's a lot to obviously, uh, uh, to talk about with Stanley Kubrick, and we're talking about the Kubrick universe and all of the different ways that can go into it's like endless, right? I mean, it's like somebody posted the other day, I couldn't believe I'd never thought of this or seen it, but, um, Jethro sent me this. It was a screenshot of, Jack Nicholson in The Shining, and his remember when he goes to the job interview and he's got his green tie? His green tie is and this is obviously purposeful. This is Kubrick, like, at his most, um, complex and complete with his details. The tie, obviously, not actually not obviously, but the texture of the tie that he's wearing, the green tie, is supposed to foreshadow and mimic the maze. So, I would say that Jack is the physical embodiment of the like, he carries the maze around with him, right? He carries the labyrinth because Jack is the Minotaur, right, in the labyrinth in The Shining. And chasing remember? Donna, chasing Danny through the maze. And, so there's a lot there. I mean, there's also the stuff like the, uh the monolith in 2001. It's so obvious to me, and I didn't come up with this, but it's so obvious to me watching 2001 now that the monolith is the black cube rectangle of this. It is this. That's the monolith because it's it's otherworldly, it emits, radiation, it's something that attracts everyone to it, they live by it, and it's something that's, like, becomes something sort of neo-archetypal, in the film, and, who was it? I think it was Rob Ager. It was Rob Ager at Collative Learning. Check out you guys, I'm sure, know Rob Ager's work, Rob Ager, and of course, Jay Dyer at, Jay's Analysis. Jay did his biggest streams, the ones that went mega viral were Eyes Wide Shut and The Shining. So Jay did awesome analyses of The Shining and Eyes Wide Shut. Maybe we should do From Novell by Arthur Schnitzler. Maybe we should see if Jay wants to do that. We could do the short story that Eyes Wide Shut is based on. That might be interesting for a literary analysis. I've got it right up there somewhere. Um, so what was I saying? So, yeah, so Rob Ager pointed out in Full Metal Jacket, there is an odd thing where when they're making their way through the kind of labyrinth of the city, in the end sequence of the film, there is a scene where one of the buildings is black. It looks like the monolith on fire, like it's burning. And ordinarily, like with, film analysis, when you point out details in films and you discuss the symbolism and how the kind of subtext of the film relates within the artwork, like, you have to be careful that you're not pointing out extraneous details that are just, like that have they have to work fluidly throughout the film, just like in a work of literature, right? This is like the way that when we're talking about Shakespeare's the best example of this. When there's a word, for instance, that seems out of place, in Shakespeare, even for an Elizabethan text, when there's a word that seems out of place, it has to relate later on in the film. It's like I think of it like a big spider web. Like the things have to connect. The levels in even in a sonnet or in a lyric poem, the words all have to connect in different layers of meaning. They all have to be fluid. They all have to be consistent. So, there's a danger when watching Kubrick, especially that he may send you on red herrings, and he can do that. But even the red herring itself has to be consistent in a Kubrick work. Like if something seems out of place, it has to connect to other things that are out of place. The form and the content have to work together. So, for example, like Um, one of the things visually about I know I'm just babbling here, just, humor me while I babble. Thanks. Thanks y'all for being here for this analysis of Michael Mann's The Keep that's sort of gone into other films. Um, there's a thing about The Shining where visually Kubrick always does this. Everything is square on, right? It's like you're moving. A lot of times you pan over or you follow the characters down the hall. Think of like following Danny down the hall when he's on his three wheel, right? Well, there's a part in The Shining where all of a sudden, it's right after she discovers that Jack has been writing the manifesto, the all work and no play make Jack a dull boy, right? Which is also fits in the film because it's like he's right. It's like a weird inverted nursery rhyme, right? Think of the encounter with the Gemini twins. Think of Danny at the beginning. Danny, dissociates. So we have like these nursery rhymes that sort of go like totally wrong, right? Well, after she discovers that, and we see her backing up, and she's got the knife in her hand, and her face, you can tell that she at this point is also experiencing a severe trauma where like her mind is breaking, her psyche is breaking. Well, when we see that, right after we see that, the next angle that we see in the hotel, it's not like this anymore. It's like this. So we see instead of right angles and squares, we see like a weird kind of diagonal, and things don't make sense anymore. It's like when you're a kid and you go to like the science museum and they have that thing, at least they did here. You go to that thing where like you walk in the Alice in Wonderland little hallway and it's like big at the start and it's got a checkerboard floor and then it gets warped and you end up like crouching down because there's a visual trick, there's an illusion. Well, it's like that. And that's to signify that everything that made sense in their world and for us, the audience, is now warped. So the things that we're seeing are skewed. Things they just don't make sense. They're not right. And it's a really subtle thing that Kubrick does that he's a master of. And I think that those are obviously the purposeful details in the cinematography and the staging, right, in the blocking. But those things for Kubrick especially are all purposeful. And you know, I tend to like I tend to hate I'm glad we're away from the era of like the DVD commentary and the extra features because those annoy me because they're interesting like for people who like films, but in a way they don't matter. They're moot because if the thing cannot be explained in your analysis in terms of like the actual artwork, then it doesn't matter. And earlier I think I got sidetracked, but I was talking about how Tarantino said that I think it was Tarantino. He was talking about like the director's cut is not it's a thing, but it's not really a thing because whatever is produced as the final product of the film, the artwork, it has to be contained within the bookends of the work. So if there's a director's cut, that's a completely different film, right? Think about how like Apocalypse Now Redux is like a becomes a completely different film. We have the French plantation scene, and that adds like there's this whole other element. Now that also does have the line that I think is probably the best line in the whole movie. I mean, every line's great, but the line where the French woman says to Willard, she says, "There are two of you, one that loves and one that kills." And that is like the whole work, Heart of Darkness, right there in itself, right? That there are two of him. Just like there are sort of two Kurtzes, there are two Jack Torrances, there are certainly two Dannys. Um, Michael Hare also, by the way, the wrote the voiceover for Apocalypse Now, and then he wrote the dialogue, some of the dialogue for Full Metal Jacket. One more interesting thing that I sort of realized I had like a weird epiphany about Kubrick the other day. I was watching a I was watching an interview with Vincent D'Onofrio. I just said that I hate these things, but this this like did provide some sort of insight for me. I was watching this interview with like Vincent D'Onofrio and Matthew Modine talking about Full Metal Jacket, and they were asking the crew is asking them about like Kubrick and about his directing style, and like the whole thing was about his takes, like how many takes he did. And that also is like bullshit to me. I can see Kubrick's, hearing about these things and being like, "This is so who cares about this?" Right? And the reason being that, you know, I find that, like, so typical of actors, and I can say this because I was one, that the actor the actor is being paid a lot of money to do, to do a film, to essentially to entertain people, and you think about how, like, kind of ridiculous that is on its face, that there are people who make their living entertaining people, and I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it's ridiculous in light of the the everyday person who makes a living, like, laboring or doing something essential or, like, building something, and you have people that just go and play dress up and entertain. And that terminology I got from Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole who discussed that. Like, Richard Burton said that he just was astounded. He couldn't get over the fact that, in his life, he came from Wales where everyone he knew and everyone in his family, like, broke their back as slate miners or coal miners in Wales, and yet here he was, like, playing dress up for a living. He thought it was ridiculous. And so the actors have this thing where, like, they get paid all this money to be on a film set, and, then they complain because of the number of takes that the director makes them do in the film. Right. Because okay, so it's like, yeah, you're in that world and you have to be on set at 5 AM and then you work like this 15-hour day or whatever. Come on, man, you're playing, right? And that's one thing that I love about Tom Coombe is that, uh, he never cared about that. He's like, "I'm here to do a professional job. We're gonna entertain people. This is the job, and we're gonna do as many takes as it takes," right? So I get, so he gets that. But Vincent D'Onofrio was like they were like, "Okay, so how did he work with actors?" And Vincent D'Onofrio was like, "Well, he would give us directions like, he would say, 'Okay, do it better,' or 'Do that line over again and, like, just do it differently,' or 'It's not right. It's just okay, take 45. It's just not right. It doesn't work. It's not right.' Or 'Do it better.'" And the thing that I realized about this was that, um, one, on the surface level, obviously, it's that Kubrick was not interested in, like, being an actor's director, okay, which is obvious when you watch his films, but there's a reason for that. And the reason is that he's not interested in getting the realism of the method, deep emotion, from the actors to, convey this to the audience. That's not what his films are like. His films are meant to be dreamlike and otherworldly. There's something amiss. That's like all of his movies are like that. You watch Eyes Wide Shut and you're like, "Why is Nicole Kidman talking like this?" No one talks like this. And it's because it's surreal. When we see her speaking, we don't know as an audience member whether she's in the cult or she's not, whether she's dreaming the things she's talking about or whether it's a fantasy or whether she actually did them, and it's ambiguous, right? Full Metal Jacket also is surreal. Like they Matthew Modine is a journalist marine who goes into a war zone. They kill this sniper, and then the movie ends with them, like, singing the Mickey Mouse Club theme song. Like, it's surreal because war itself is surreal, right? And our depiction of it, the way we view war is surreal. So he's not interested in any of that stuff. And the number of takes are because Kubrick was cognizant of the fact that movies are art does this, but movies are the thing that will live forever. So when actors like, are weird and like want, immortality in all their creepy ways, well, in one sense, they do get this in the sense that they're giants, they're larger than life. You go to the movies and you see them on a screen and they're literally bigger than everybody in the audience, right? You have a close up. All actors want a close up because their face takes up the entire screen and their face is bigger than, 10 humans standing on each other's shoulders. They're huge. They're larger than life. They are stars. They're called stars. Like we're looking up to them like they're celestial beings. They're on a silver screen, so it's like a magic it's some sort of magic, like, scrying screen, right? We're, like, supposed to look beyond, you're piercing the veil to see, like, this other world, and when you're watching the movie, you suspend your disbelief, like Coleridge said about literature, and you believe the things that you're being shown, right? That's what movies are, and Kubrick knew that you he wanted as many takes as it took to get what he knew would live forever. So if there's a mistake or there's something out of place, like it's going to be there forever. You can't change it when it's done, right? You can't change it. So, so I think that's interesting about Kubrick. But yeah, but the sort of epiphany that I had was that yes, exactly. Fun Punk says yes. Stars of the silver screen, Hollywood, man. Um, Kenneth Anger points this out, of all people. Kenneth Anger points this out in his book, Hollywood Babylon. If you haven't read that book, and you are into this sort of stuff or conspiracy or anything like that, I would read that book. Kenneth Anger he was a child star, like what he's old. Um, or watch his interviews with James Franco. Remember when people said that James Franco was the high priest of the LaVey thing? Which who knows, may be true. Or his interviews with Nicholas Winding Refn, the director of Too Old to Die Young and Drive. Those are interesting. I don't know. They're probably all OTO or something like that. You know, Kenneth Anger obviously is a Salemite. His film going to Cefalù Abbey. But anyway, read that book, Hollywood Babylon. It's great about the golden age of Hollywood and how it's the corruption involved and how all these people had scandals. The chapter, especially on uh, one chapter that sticks out is the one on Rudolph Valentino. That one's interesting because any of you guys reading it now would immediately assume the thing that he says about Rudolph Valentino in the book. There's a certain object that he talks about that's pretty, it's a weird, creepy Skittles thing. But it itself was kind of a monolithic thing amongst the set um, that was involved in, like, he talks about the Black Dahlia and what's his name, Doctor and George Hodel. He talks about Man Ray. Shouts out to Jesse out there. Says, by the way, your analyses of Tess of the D'Urbervilles and Wuthering Heights were masterclass. Thank you. That's really kind. Do you think Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, Sense of Sensibility, etc., books come close to the same level or caliber? Um, Really good question, and thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I mean, yeah, go back and watch those analyses, people, if you're watching this. Those were 2 that were, uh, you know, I don't wanna say, like, out of my, like, area because they're right in it, but I sort of always avoid, those types of, 19th century, books with those particular writers, and Wuthering Heights, I know well, I knew well, but Wuthering Heights is interesting because of the main thing I like about it is the heath itself, because that's an example of, like, how the environment and the ambiance in the book, like, plays, is almost a character in itself and is a great setting for the kind of, like, generational family, shenanigans that go on in the book. Yeah, so, well, I think that about, who was it? Jane Austen? I think that, uh, certainly in terms of, like, the canon of literature, Jane Austen is viewed that way, and probably, rightly so, I guess. I mean, I guess she's, earned her place in the canon. Um, but it's interesting how different, Jane Austen is from, for instance, the Brontes. I mean, totally, like, obviously totally different. Now, people in terms of, like, maybe in academia, I guess, would or the average reader who knows anything about them would, like, probably group them together because it's 2 19th century female writers. Um, but they are completely different. I think that, that the Brontes are, like, on a complete they're on a whole other level than Jane Austen, and, I mean, Jane Austen is not really concerned with the esoteric or, anything like, that delves into the kind of spiritual realm that, that the Brontes are into, and that to me is just like the Brontes are much more interesting. I've always, like, in my mind kind of associated, like, Ted Hughes as a some sort of weird, like, successor to the Brontes. I mean, obviously because he's from, um, like, the same area. I mean, he's from Yorkshire, so it's slightly different, but that sort of if you've ever been there, by the way, um, anybody who lives there will know this, obviously, but, like, the Yorkshire Dales and the Heath and Northumberland is, like it's an odd place. It's odd. It's like, you're in this part of England it's firmly English, but, um, it's like it's so expansive and, like, there are just these great swaths of, like, empty landscape where there's, like, nothing there but, like, wind and heather, the trees are gone. You can see, like, how the landscape sort of undulates, and you can see why people have, been there for so long and, like, start to kind of hallucinate and see, specters of things because the landscape, like, plays tricks on you. Uh, okay, all right, so back to the, Kubrick. Yeah, so to answer your question, I think that, Jane Austen is seen that way, but I personally, like, don't I'm not, like, a Jane Austen fan, if that makes sense. Um, Jerry says, "What was your Kubrick epiphany?" Alright, so my Kubrick epiphany was that, um how do I explain this? That, uh, the the complexity like, oftentimes simplicity is the answer. It's like the simplest answer for the most complex things, and I think that people watching Kubrick wanna make a huge deal of all of the details and especially of the characters and their dialogue, but I think the answer is that that's part of it, and that's in his mind, but really what it comes down to is that, um, the characters are pawns, in this big, chess game of all of his work, like, of his oeuvre, right? And, of course, Kubrick himself, he was a chess player, and all of his works are, concern themselves, like, with different aspects of sort of deep societal issues that are bigger than the individual characters. They're playing roles in the context of this small thing in each story in each movie that are supposed to be emblematic of the bigger thing, but in the end it's like the reason they act that way is because um it's like he didn't I don't think he cared. I don't think he cared about that. And that's weird because everything else in his films he cares about, but the way that the characters act, he does not care about. It's not important. And my reason for saying that is the very fact that he's like, just do it like this or do it better, right? And I know that the actors would say like, what's my motivation? What's my motivation in saying this? And where's my Evian? And he would be like, I'm not gonna. His answer was like, I'm not gonna do the work that you're supposed to be doing. Just do it right, and then we'll know. So it's like an accident. His films are accidental, and I think that that's sort of an epiphany because people want to think that his films are like planned all the way through. Everything's mapped out, right? Well, the shots are mapped out, and the set dressing is mapped out, and like the way the story goes is mapped out. But the way that the characters get there is accidental. It doesn't. It's like incidental. And when he found the right thing, he was like, "All right, we'll take it." So, um, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's my epiphany. That might sound kind of underwhelming, but, that's what I got from Kubrick. Okay, what else? Any other questions? Should I check the super chats? Paths of Glory is amazing. And I like the Paths of Glory is amazing because of course the title comes from what is it? Thomas Gray's elegy written in a country churchyard, right? Um the paths of glory lead but to the grave. So you know the way the story is going to end if you read the poem. And Kirk Douglas is amazing in that. That's a great film. That is my second favorite World War One movie. My first is uh Grand Illusion. You guys seen surely Jerry's seen Grand Illusion. Grand Illusion's amazing because it's got Eric von Stroheim in it, the man you love to hate, right? He's got like a back brace and a monocle. What an awesome character. That dude is like that dude like just exists to be in film, right? He just looks exactly like what he's supposed to be in that movie. That's a great movie, Grand Illusion. Um, so should I check super chats? Let's look see if we have any super chats here that I haven't seen. Let's check this dono chat. Anybody drop a dono chat? A dono dot chat? Let's see. Okay. Let me look at the supers here, make sure I got them. Yes. So let's see. Yo, yeah, okay. Shouts out again to Maddie, who dropped $10. Shouts out to Mav, who dropped that $20. Shouts out to Raymond, to Raymond Cannon out there who drops $30. No comment. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Shouts out to Jesse, who asked the question about Kubrick. Shouts out to the Marlowe Life, who drops $10. Says, appreciate your content base, always inspiring me to read more deeply. Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Really appreciate that. That's really cool. Shouts out to Jesse Matthew again for that $10 about Test of the D'Urbervilles. So I really appreciate that. That's really cool. Thanks y'all for the comments and for the super chats. Let's check. Hold on, let me get back here. Let's see. All right, let's check these other ones real quick, you guys. Thanks for hanging around here tonight. Really appreciate y'all. Um, let's see. Shouts out to Ray Cannon, who sent $20 for the Bayes Lit analysis. $20 on Cash App. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that, homie. Shouts out to Devin Allman, who sent $10 via Venmo. Shouts out to our homeboy out there. Thank you so much. Cheers to you. See, shouts out to Jesse for that $5 PayPal. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much for all the support. And that's a that's an obvious spam. I'm not clicking on that one. That one's weird. Igloo. Okay. Yeah, shouts out to everybody. Thank you so much. Thanks, y'all. Really appreciate it. If you got any ideas for streams, please drop them in the comments afterwards, or you can drop me an email. Y'all know my email by now. And I got a bunch of stuff on the way. I've got some sponsor streams on the way. Um, and if you want to see more movie analysis, let me know. I mean, I try, I'm not like the movie analysis channel. We're the lit analysis channel. We're trying to do literature. So I like to do movies that are based in literature and give you a based analysis. That's why we did F. Paul Wilson's The Keep here. And read the book first. I was thinking about getting that book, The Bluegrass Conspiracy, because Jay's talked about that before in relation to the Dixie Mafia, and maybe I can talk about that with Maddie. Um, Klon says, "Have you seen Something Wicked This Way Comes? And if so, do you like it?" No, I haven't seen that. Um, no, I haven't seen it, even though it's a title that comes from Macbeth, of course. And yeah, so if you like my movie analysis, let me know. Just give me some ideas for things to cover, especially if they are based in literature or books. I will be doing, speaking of 19th century literature, I will be doing a Great Expectations analysis. That's one that everyone has read. That seems like not something that I don't know. You might not be interested in it, but I think I'm going to do a pretty good analysis of that because there's a new series out on Hulu, which is, like, so decadent. It's totally decadent. It's it's pretty wild. So, I'll do that and the series analysis, Gran Torino. I just rewatched Gran Torino the other day. Great film. And Clint Eastwood is kind of the opposite of Kubrick or of Michael Mann, because Clint Eastwood is notorious for, not notorious, he's famous for, staying on budget and, on time. He's very good with his management of his films. However, I will say that Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil is the worst movie I've ever seen. It is so bad. And I could not get over, like, how poor this movie was. It was just really poorly done. So, um, get off my lawn. All right, so that's all we got, y'all. Thank you for being here. Hit the like button, share, and I'll be back later. I know DPH is gonna be around, with our homegirl based homeschool mama this week. And shouts out to Jerry, everybody out there. Really appreciate y'all. I love you. And leave a comment. All right. Thank you. Appreciate y'all. Peace.